West Michigan's economic recovery has been slow and steady, but are there signs it's about to stall out? We'll discuss the short and long-term effects of the European debt crisis and China's influence on West Michigan Week. And thank you for joining us on West Michigan Week. On the panel, flying solo, Carol Valet, Grand Rapids Business Journal. Yes, we are. But our focus is on the economy and business, and no one knows it quite as well as you do. Brian Long, who is the Director of Supply Management Research at the Seidman College of Business at Grand Valley State University. How are you, sir?
Pleasure to be with you here today.
Well, you are the man who crunches the numbers. You do the research. 54 purchasing and supply managers are interviewed by you across Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo region, and you kind of get that pulse of where we are and where we're headed. And you're on the show because we're not really sure right now where we're headed. Who's behind the curtain? What are you seeing in the recent survey?
Well, our data right now are still positive. And of course, we've been in this very slow, steady recovery mode for over 2 years now. There is signs that it has started to slow just a little bit, though, compared to where we were just, say, in the middle of the summer. And of course, you wonder just exactly how much are you going to slow, and are we going to get to that point that we actually turn negative? Because of all the talk that we've heard about the possibility of a double dip to the recession that we've hopefully gotten out of.
Do you think we're past that point?
Well, right now, we're not sure because it all depends on Europe. Right now, if we had to just go with the U.S. economy, if we just had to go with what's going on in the state of Michigan, what's going on here in Greater Grand Rapids, I would say certainly we're past that point that we have to worry about a double dip to the recession. Now, that doesn't mean that we've crawled out of the hole that we were in, that we dug ourselves a really deep hole. We still have some very high unemployment, not only in the nation, but also in the state and far ahead of where we should be in the local area here. But we were and continue to say that we're on the path of digging out right now. Our numbers, are, as I said, are remaining positive. But that possibility remains that Europe, if things go wrong over there and the euro falls apart or there's some massive defaults of some sort that draw us into it, we could in fact find ourselves drawn into another phase either of the current recession or a new recession, depending on how you want to label it.
Brian, I wonder if maybe it's important to explain, you know, the work of those who are purchasing managers and watching supplies and inventory and that type of thing. It's got to be a wild guessing game in the kind of roller coaster economy we've had. Do you hear that from these individuals?
Very much so, because of the ups and downs in prices that they have to deal with.
The commodities prices?
The commodities prices. We went to a record level, again, on copper, just as a for instance. And the average person on the street doesn't buy copper, but they buy things that are made of copper. And those prices went right up through the roof, largely because of speculation, not unlike what they did in 2008. And once again, those prices have come down dramatically. I had people that emailed me that they couldn't respond to the survey this month because they were so busy. This would have been 2 or 3 months ago because they couldn't find supply, and the supply that they were finding was so overpriced that they had to do a lot of work just to find prices and availability that could meet their needs. And now all of that has faded. Unfortunately, we don't always call that positive when prices come down in the industrial market, because it generally denotes weakness, and in this instance, it's weakness in the world markets. In fact, many of the European countries are now considered to be either right on the edge or into another phase of this recession or a new recession, depending on how you look at it.
I don't want to get, maybe we can take it from the microcosm of the region and sort of build out to that. What you're seeing right now is again, the word growth in the report is, it's nice. It's not like 2008, 2009.
Growth is still growth.
And it's steady.
Yes.
And based on especially the automotive sales and that
Yes.
sector, you're seeing continued growth.
And a lot of our growth is still automotive. It's the recovery of the auto industry. The firms that survived, many of them, even those locally here, are at capacity right now. They've also indicated that the schedules through the end of the year are stronger than what they were initially indicated to be.
Okay.
And that turns out, of course, to be good news too. These people that respond to the survey, though, spend billions of dollars a year. If I took all 54 of those people and added their companies together, these are people spending somewhere between 10 and 15 billion dollars a year. This is really high-ticket stuff, but again, it's the raw materials that keep companies going. So when they buy more or buy less, they pull money in and out of the economy very, very quickly. And this happens all over the world, and as I said right now, part of our backing down is the fact that the speculation has gone out of the market for some of the key commodities. Steel, of course, is one of them, as well as copper. I'm going to say aluminum is in that category too. And as a result of these commodities coming down in price, money is coming out of the world economy right now. And of course, that's contributing to this slowdown that we're seeing around the world.
I was going to mention the Brookings Institution survey that came out that Grand Rapids was one of the top 20 manufacturing metros to recover. But now, as we look at this, their focus, or at least the claim in the study, was that it was really based on automotive. The automotive and suppliers. Others would argue, well, there's more diversity in this market than you might think.
Well, I'm going to credit office furniture for part of that, too.
I was going to ask about that as well.
Office furniture, 14% of the world's office furniture, is made within 30 miles of right here. And so, needless to say, what they are doing influences this local area right here. And they were in just as deep a recession as everybody else in 2009, but they have pulled out partly because of the liquidity of companies. The downside of these companies having all of this cash right now is that people have noticed the cash and said, you remember that new office furniture you promised us 10 years ago? Well, gee, you're sitting on lots of cash now. How about? And that has, in part, been the thing that fueled the market. It hasn't been any massive expansion, if you will, in industry. It's been, well, a lot of it has been replacement of old furniture.
Both Steelcase and Herman Miller, in a very big way, have entered the healthcare market with furniture. And certainly Herman Miller appears to be having a pretty generous year and boosted by those types of sales. With that sort of diversification, do you think there's opportunity then for the furniture industry to move through any downturn? Or do you think Europe is going to have a direct impact on Zeeland and Grand Rapids?
Not as big of an impact, in part for the reason that you just mentioned. They are diversifying in the direction of medical, and of course medical is rising right now, still on the move upward. And as a result of that, I do believe that they are cushioned against a downturn. But unfortunately, they are a cyclical industry, and if the companies start to tighten up, office furniture is one of the things that they can tighten up on very quickly.
I would think steel is a big issue for them in terms of supply and cost.
Very much so, and the price of steel is coming down now, rather dramatically, I might add, because the steel market, I don't want to call it a monopoly market, but it's getting close to that because of the limited number of companies that are left in the business anymore. And by that, I mean the world steel market. And this is becoming difficult for the local companies because they are relegated once again to the world market. And we all know who uses the most steel. Almost 45% of it is used by China. The world supply of steel, 45% is used by China. Well, now China's trying to cool their economy down some right now, so they're not buying as much steel, and so that makes it more available.
Is China's economy, is the government slowing it down, or is it just a natural effect of what's been taking place globally.
Their central banking system is trying to slow it down, and the government is trying to slow it down. Interest rates in China right now are about 6.5%, which of course would be sky high for us right now. And they're trying to prevent their economy from overheating. And there's evidence that that has happened, particularly in their housing market. We don't know how that's going to shake out right now because they've run the price of their housing market up so much over there, and now it's starting to come down. We don't know how fast it's going to come down. We do know they have a lot of room over there, that all they have to do is cut their interest rate, and it'll probably stabilize their housing market. We don't have that option here. We've already cut to close to zero. So unfortunately, we can't use the same tools that they're using. They are also sitting on $3.2 trillion worth of foreign reserves. And that gives them a tremendous amount of flexibility, too, as far as stimulating their economy, whatever they want to.
And there has been the debate that's taking place in Congress right now about the devaluation of the Chinese currency. What are the impacts? As you take the global look at things and here locally, this debate, where do you come down on this? Is Congress doing the right thing, or do we need to back off and not challenge the Chinese government on this one?
We need to ask them nicely, is a good way of putting it. Well, the thing is it has been working. They have been letting their currency appreciate for really about the last 18 months or so. Now, we were pegged at a particular level 6 years ago or so, and we asked them, and they lowered their peg just a little bit, and appropriately, their currency came up in value. And we asked them again, and the currency started coming up in value. Now, they wanted it to come up in an orderly fashion, which they've been letting it do, but the American politicians have been hammering them so hard. That's not something that you want to do to somebody that you owe that much money to. They are sitting on our paper. We want them to continue to buy our paper, and we can't just make these people mad, because the kids in Tiananmen Square found out what happens when you make this government too mad. Even if it's against their better or long-term betterment, they'll go ahead and back the people down, and they'll do the same thing to us too. So
frightening prospect.
Yes, yes. So it's a case of balance. At what point do we push them, and at what point do we push them too hard? Because again, doing business in China right now is 20 to 30% more expensive than it was just 3 years ago. Now that's partially raising of the labor rates, partially the valuation of the currency, and all the other factors that are added into this. China isn't the place that we're going to lose a bunch of jobs to. In fact, we've got jobs coming back from China now. The fact is, we have to look at the rest of the world. The countries like Indonesia that have huge populations, India, of course, they want to get in on this Commerce Act too around the world. And they are gradually getting in, and if you check prices, as some of our people have, it's less money than doing business with China.
All right, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the world economy and the impacts here in West Michigan. And we're back with Brian Long, who is the Director of Supply Management Research at the Siebern College of Business at Grand Valley State University. We were discussing China and the impacts of China on the world, but really right now the spotlight is on
Spain,
Europe, well Greece,
Spain too,
Italy, Spain, Ireland.
As the Germans like to say, the pig countries.
That's right.
It's Greece.
PIIGS, I might add too,
yes,
because
okay.
they throw Ireland along with Italy in there too. Portugal, Italy, Ireland,
Greece,
and Spain. Those are the countries that have the debt problem. And it's all structured differently, so every country has a different problem. They're not identical problems like you see in Greece. This is just one country with one problem. But Greece's problem is 1/7 the size of, say, Italy's problem. So Greece is a heck of a lot easier to bail out than some of these larger countries.
It's interesting, though. There was one economist not too long ago that was talking about the Eurozone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a Eurozone. If you look at it as one piece, the economy's doing pretty well.
Yes.
But if you break it down into individual countries, you can break the thing up and say, well, it's a terrible place, and you have one currency, but you have different treasuries in each state, so it's not the most cohesive of environments. Does it work, or are we seeing the effects of what doesn't work and how terrible it can be when the Eurozone fails?
Well, what happened is when they put the Eurozone together, they didn't have a very good policing system for when somebody starts to slide out of line. I mean, Greece has been sliding out of line for the last 6 or 7 years, and all they've really done is say, gee, you got to do better. And finally, it hit the wall. And
Nice way to put it.
It's the proverbial canary in the coal mine or whatever. They were simply the first country to hit the wall of having overpromised their retirees what they could give them. You can't retire at 52 and at 90% of your pay and expect that the current workers are going to make up for all of that money. And what they've been doing is just borrowing the money up until now.
That's a culture, though, that spreads far and wide in Europe. It's not just Greece. I mean, maybe that retirement's a lot earlier, and maybe the amount of money that gets transferred in retirement's a little bit higher, but there is a general culture there.
There is, but we have that same problem in the United States with Social Security. We've overpromised. I mean, some of the politicians call it a Ponzi scheme, and that's what a Ponzi scheme does, is it takes the current money coming in to pay the people from the past and hope that you stay ahead of the whole thing. Bernie Madoff thought that he could stay ahead of it until after he was dead, and then he wasn't going to have to worry about it. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. It all hit the wall one day, and it will with Social Security. But how long have we been saying that now? 20, 30 years at least? And at some point, we're going to have to come back and address those same issues like they're addressing in Greece right now, to say we've got to make the system actuarially sound. And so that we've got money put away so that it covers the people that, in fact, are expecting that money sometime in the future. And we don't have that now.
Will it be, could it ever be the kind of calamity that it has been in those European nations?
We hope not, because we hope that they're going to show us the way.
I see. That's why we have the canary in Spain.
Exactly. We're hoping that they will endure enough pain or whatever and show how it's fixed so that we can come back and say, look, we've got to do the same thing they did. Even though it's painful, even though there's people that are going to say, oh, no, I was sure that I was going to get X amount 20 years from now. Well, we have to go to some of those people that are going to retire 20 years from now and say, you're not going to get that amount of money. Plan on it now, not the current recipients. Greece has to go back to its current recipients. And the hit is pretty substantial, I might add. 14.6%, if you can believe that. That's how far they have run themselves into the red, if you can believe that. And as I said, the rest of the European community up until now has let them get away with it. And of course, finally, it got to the point that they just couldn't borrow any more money.
You're saying, though, that they'll lead the way, but sometimes, I'm being the cynic here. We've been through debt reduction and balancing budgets before. Why is it so difficult this time? It seems like everybody has the right ideology here. We're not seeing it. So I just question whether or not looking at Greece and we're going to go, oh yeah, we'll follow their lead. I think there are too many people with different ideas in this country.
Well, we're going to kick the can down the road initially, I suppose. And we do respond to emergencies. Like World War II, we went into World War II with the 14th largest army in the world. if you can believe that. But America can turn on a dime when it needs to. And that's what we're hoping will happen here. The problem is we need to awaken the younger people in this country right now, that the money that they're paying in right now is going just to the people who are currently retired. That's not money that's being salted away for them. And that if they want to correct this situation so that there's something for them someplace down the road, 30, 40 years from now, they better get on the wagon of helping with this correction.
They're paying their student loans right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is another issue.
We're a country of debt. That's about what it amounts to. I hear statistics that say, well, 1 out of 3 people is just one paycheck away from bankruptcy. Well, how in tarnation did we get ourselves into this much debt? How did we institutionalize the idea that all of us are supposed to run out and max out our credit cards and max out our credit every place? Well, everybody doesn't do that. 31% of the people pay off their credit cards every month. But then there's others that have 6 or even as many as 10 credit cards, and they're using one to pay the next. And of course, these are the people that get themselves into fiscal trouble. And of course, they look at the government and say, well, it's just like I am. What's the big deal?
I have a theory behind that.
Well,
my theory is it's called
institutions come to mind with
but it's called
26% interest.
it's called living the American dream.
Yeah.
You know, our parents had this great life post World War II, and I think people still want to live that dream. And you bring out the credit card if you truly want to live it. Of course, I think there was a generation too that saved its money a little bit better to live the
I was going to say
dream.
there's a big difference probably between GI tract housing and the creation of the suburbs and what you see now in terms of that, just spending for housing, and that isn't even covered as part of the, what we look at as the gross domestic product, which confuses me too. So, but
Nothing confuses you. What are you talking about?
Going back to Europe, things are in balance for now. And what do you see as anything that could tip it? What thing is worrying you in tipping that balance?
Papandreou being deposed right now, in other words, the government failing, and we have to go to another election, which would be very short term, of course, 6 weeks or something like that on a parliamentary election. But we'd have another 6 weeks of uncertainty, and even when the new government was formed, there would be this uncertainty. And in the meantime, Greece needs money, and they need it now. That's their big problem right now, and we don't know how the creditors are going to act if, in fact, they don't have a resolution that, yes, we have agreed that this is what we're going to do. We're going to make these cuts, we're going to make these changes, and we're going to balance the budget, at least to get us down to 120% of GDP as far as our debt is concerned.
A referendum on that in what, January?
Well, that's not going to happen now.
They backed off.
They backed off on that because the people said, in so many words, we can't wait until January. And Sarkozy and Merkel both got on Papandreou's case and said, hey, I don't know what you thought you were pulling with that, but we just tried real hard to convince our people at our own political expense, I might add, because neither one of those are popular figures anymore in their own countries, that we ought to do this for the good of the euro. And now you're turning around and saying you're going to mess the whole thing up for us and put up a referendum that probably won't pass. He was hoping that he could get cover on that, and that between now and January he could convince enough of the people that, oh, this is really what we need to do. But you've got a mentality there in Greece right now that I think is just gradually starting to change, that they understand what they have done to themselves, the corner that they've backed themselves into, and that there just isn't any place to go.
Are you optimistic?
I am neither optimistic or pessimistic. I watch the news on a moment-to-moment basis to find out what's happening, because this has been such a roller coaster. You know, last week we thought it was all set, and then Papandreou comes up with this referendum concept. And
From out of the blue, I don't think anybody was expecting that.
nobody was expecting that. He was trying to find himself some political cover, of course, and stop the riots in the street. But that's the problem. The people there found out that all you have to do is riot in the street and the government will give in, borrow some more money. And even up until a couple of weeks ago, I think they were still thinking, oh, Europe won't let us fail. All we've got to do is raise enough commotion and they'll come through with the money. They're not going to let the euro fail over Greece. And somebody else's money, of course.
Right. All right. We will have you back because this will continue to develop. Carol Valade, Grand Rapids Business Journal, thank you for stopping in and flying solo, as mentioned, and Brian Long, Director of Supply Management Research at the Seaman College of Business at Grand Valley State University. It's a mouthful, but we got it out. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure to be here, as always.
Providing the insight. And thank you for joining us this week. We'll see you next week on West Michigan Week.